Hi, everybody. I'm Dallas Mount. I work with Ranch Management Consultants. We're a ranching consulting company that works all over the U.S., Mexico, and Canada with ranchers on business management issues. So really with anybody involved in agriculture on business management issues, our clientele are broader than just ranchers. And National Grazing Lens has asked me to do a short webinar today on economics in light of not being able to get together in person and go to meetings. We thought this would be a good way to get some information out. So let's, without further ado, let's just roll into it. So I'm going to try to share my screen here. All right. So we're going to talk through ranch profitability and just a quick introduction of who we are and what we do. RMC is our company, Ranch Management Consultants. We do two main things. We run a 7-day business management school for those in agriculture called the Ranching for Profit School. This is based on the idea that knowing how to raise livestock is not the same thing as knowing how to run a business that raises livestock. They're two entirely different things, and we'll get into why that's the case here. And oftentimes when we grow up in ranching, we spend all of our time learning how to raise livestock, and nobody ever teaches us how to run a business that raises livestock. So that's what we do. We also have a program called the Executive Link program, and Executive Link is based on the idea that when you're self-employed, you work for a lunatic. This comes from Michael Gerber in his book called The E-Myth. And Executive Link, we bring ranchers together on boards of directors for each other, and they provide each other strategic advice. They meet 3 times a year and look inside each other's businesses and provide that strategic advice to each other and hold each other accountable too. So those are the two main things that we do. So these are our schools coming up for the coming year. If you have an interest in getting involved in one of those, we just recently moved our Oklahoma City school that was scheduled in early May till mid-August. And we've got a school coming up in Columbus, Georgia, and then the rest of the schedule there. And these can all be found on our website at ranchmanagement.com. So if it's something we can help you with, please jump on there. It's been said, if you never do the hard thing, that life will be hard. But if you'll do the hard thing, life can be easier. I would change that too. So what's the easy thing in ranching and agriculture? Well, the easy thing is to do the things that we're familiar with, that we've always grown up doing, that we do day to day. The easy thing is to go outside and get busy with another task. The hard thing can be learning things that we're not comfortable doing, learning how to work on our business, not just in our business, but on our business. Learning how to identify the things in our business that are working and the things that are not working, and learning to identify the leverage points that we have to address changes that can make our lives better, can make us better financially, economically, and can just make life more enjoyable. Because, you know, really, who wants to be involved in agriculture if all it is a lot of work with really low paying jobs and it's not very financially rewarding? Wouldn't it be more fun to be involved in a business that was a moderate amount of work? We still got to do the things we enjoyed, but was also financially rewarding along the way. So that's where we come into play, and that's what we do. So let's look into a real life situation here. And I hesitate to read this to you, but I'm recognizing some of you are probably listening to this while you're driving or doing other things. So if you're looking at this on a screen, read along with me. But if you're just listening to this, I'll read it for you. Dear Dallas, we're having some struggles about the direction to take our ranching business. We run about 300 cows. We develop our own heifers. We sell some bred heifers, and we put up just enough hay to winter everything. When prices are good, we do okay, but we've had some very lean years as well. Well, my son and his wife joined us here 5 years ago, and he's getting frustrated with how I do things. He suggested we sell the cow herd and run yearlings, that we quit putting up hay and that we grazed all of our hay ground, and even suggested we just custom graze pairs for other people. Well, I've worked my whole life to put together a quality herd that fits this ranch, and it frustrates me that he wants to toss all that out after only being here a few years. At the same time, I don't want to be too dismissive of his ideas. I remember how my dad shut me down, and after a while, I just stopped making suggestions. I'm not sure he understands how risky yearlings are, how difficult custom grazing clients can be, or how expensive hay can get in drought years. I want to keep this ranch together, build some financial reserves, and keep my son and his family here ranching with us. Keeping this ranch going takes both of us full time, We sometimes meet in the evenings after dark for a couple hours to work on business stuff, but there just isn't enough time to do the planning and office work we need to do. So here's my questions. How can we give his ideas a fair consideration and not throw out all my years of work putting this herd together? What specific things do we need to do to figure this out? And what's the first step? So there's a fairly common question about things that are going on in agriculture. So looking at this person's situation, what would be the first step? What do they need to figure out? Let me ask you some deeper questions related to this too. What could be the economic value to the business of getting this right? Okay, so if they were able to figure out what's working, what some strategies are to moving forward, what could be the economic value to this? Okay, so we have a little bit of an idea of scale to the business. It's 300 cows. They've got enough also develop their own heifers. They make some hay. So are we talking $5,000 a year, $10,000 a year? And no, it's probably more on the scale of $50,000 a year. I've even seen some businesses this size that make these changes and see $100,000 a year differences to getting this right. Okay. So there's huge economic value to figuring this out. We're not talking about a couple $1,000 here and there. Okay? We're talking about some substantial value. Now, the flip side of that coin, what could be the costs if things go south? Okay, so if they're not able to figure this out, if they're not able to have the hard discussions, to have the constructive discussions, to move this business forward, what could be the costs if things go south? And when we say costs, I'm not thinking about just economic and financial costs, but what could be the costs to the family if things go south? I think you guys are probably in agreement. It's really everything, right? It's the future of the ranch. It's the future of the relationships. So it's certainly worth some time and some effort and maybe some uncomfortableness with starting to figure this thing out. Okay. So let's dive in a little bit deeper on a situation and what it might look like. Okay. So here's Down and Out Farms. This is going to be the example ranch we're going to look at. I had a picture of another ranch family there, and lo and behold, one day I was giving a presentation and that ranch family was in the room. Okay. So I had to change the family that we pictured there. So I don't think Austin Kircher and Sam Elliott and whoever else is in there is going to be coming to any of my talks soon. So I think we're safe using them. So there's the ranch family. This ranch business is involved in several things. As they described, they run cows, they develop heifers, they put up hay. Just like most of your ag businesses, there's several different moving parts inside of that business. So let's look at the economics of this. So let me go back up real quick. The total sales from the farm, the ranch, was $332,000 last year. So everything that leaves this place is in the form of livestock sales. Okay? So all the feed that's raised, they feed to their own animals. So it's coal sales, calf sales, open heifers, whatever those might be. But the total livestock sales, $332,000. All right, here's the cost side of the business. Now, I could give you some time to look through this and to scrutinize it, but let's just jump right down to the bottom line. Okay, $336,000 in essentially cash costs to keep the place running over the last year. Okay. So what's life like on the business? So $332,000 of sales, $336,000 of costs. And by the way, if you took some time to look through those costs, what do you see missing? Well, I don't see any family living draw coming out of there. Okay, we have $24,000 of paid labor. That was actually some summertime help that they brought on to help them through. So there's two families that are living and two individuals that are working full time on this ranch. So other than maybe some housing and utilities, those people that are working are largely working for free. Now, is that too unusual in agriculture? Unfortunately not. A lot of people have to donate their labor in order to make the business cash flow. And in my opinion, that's not a profitable business. I think in anybody's opinion, that's not a profitable business. You'll also notice there's very little payments on here. So we're assuming essentially everything is owned land, owned cows. So we've got a huge amount of asset that's being pumped into this business every year to keep it going. Okay, so what can we do about this? And I realize I'm going through this fairly quickly, but I just want to give you guys an idea of the bottom line as to what you can do about this. So in the Ranching for Profit School, we teach an economic model that looks like this. And we say we have to look at our costs of our business in different ways. There's overhead costs, and those overhead costs are essentially the cost of keeping the doors open on the ranch. Okay? If you stopped doing everything, what kind of money is still going to continue to flow out of the business? Okay? Largely the overhead costs are made up of land and labor. Okay, land cost, the cost of getting it, like rents for ranches, or if you acquiring the land, and then the cost of upkeep. Okay, all the maintenance that goes into keeping the land business going. And then there's also labor, and labor can be broken down into two broad categories: people and things. Okay, so that red line you see, that's overhead cost. That's if we didn't have one stinking cow on the ranch. Okay, what kind of costs are going to be there just to keep the doors open on the ranch? And for most ranching businesses, most agricultural businesses, the overhead costs are the majority of the cost. In fact, for most of your businesses, it's probably 60 to 70% of the total cost of your business are overhead costs. Okay. Now, the second classification of costs are direct costs. The economists call these variable costs, right? You add one more unit and the cost increases in that one more unit as well. So we have to be diligent about separating these cost categories in our mind. Is it an overhead cost or is it a direct cost? And it's important to know the difference. Gross product, okay? Gross product is not just cash coming into the business. Gross product is the value of our production. So if we raise a heifer calf and we keep that heifer calf and she grows the cow herd, then she's counted in gross product. If we have a drought and we sell off a majority of the ranch and we have high cash income, but we sacrifice inventory for that, it's going to be reflected in the gross product. Okay, so gross product accommodates for changes in inventory, and it represents the value of our production. Now you see where the blue line and the green line intersect. To the right of that point, okay, that's profit. That's where we want to be, right? Now to the left of that point, that's normal. That's your neighbor's ranch, okay? That's everybody else in this business. And it's sad to say, but ranching and farming as a whole is really not a business. It's a hobby because most people are operating on the left-hand side of that. Okay? Most people almost every year run their farms and ranches for an economic loss. It doesn't have to be that way, okay? So what can you do about it? So let's dive into that. And there we go. There's the profit and there's the loss. Okay, so if we looked at down and out farms, so they're going to have some overhead costs, the cost of keeping the doors open on the ranch. Now, if we started dissecting their business, there's different profit centers or enterprises inside of their business. There's a cow-calf enterprise. There's a heifer development enterprise, okay? Instead of keeping those heifer calves and making bred heifers out of them, they could sell those heifer calves at weaning. Maybe they're going to find that their heifer development enterprise is the most profitable thing that they're doing. So maybe instead of keeping a few of their heifer calves, maybe they should keep a larger chunk of them. Okay? Maybe they should buy their neighbor's heifer calves and sell bred heifers. Okay, so maybe that heifer enterprise is actually working. And then there's also the hay business that's going on inside there. Okay. Now, many people think, well, we've got cows, we need to make hay. Well, not necessarily. We could buy that hay, or maybe the hay business is what's driving the profitability of the ranch. Maybe we should look at selling hay. Now, I realize that years in and years out, these things move, okay? But as we start looking at your business and dissecting that down, most of you are going to find there's something that's the profit driver for your ranch year in and year out. And counter to that, many of you are going to find that there's something going on inside your ranch, your farm, your ag business that's losing money almost every year. And if you stopped doing that, you would make more money. Okay? So for many of us, it's identifying the thing to stop doing rather than the thing to ramp up. Okay? So as we look at these things in that cow-calf business, now we introduced these terms to you. Let's go back and visit them. There's the gross product, okay? That green line that we saw on the previous page. That's the value of the production. For every one of those cows we run, there are direct costs that go along with that. Now we take gross product, we subtract direct cost, and we're left with gross margin. So that cow-calf business is contributing a margin. Now that margin is going to help cover those overheads, right? So we could have the same thing going on. Excuse me. We could have the same thing going on inside those heifers. They're making a gross margin, and the same thing going on inside that hay. It's contributing a gross margin. So we add all those gross margins up, and we see how good is that at covering those overheads, and then how much is left over for profit. So let's look back inside. Let's break this business down, right? We looked at the big numbers the first time. Let's break this business down economically and look at it from an enterprise basis, okay? So those cows, they're contributing $105,000 of gross margin, the heifers 50, and the hay 26,000. So we'll see that those cows and those heifers, well, that's really a part of our livestock division, okay? And the hay, well, that requires separate things. It's kind of a whole separate thing going on. That's a farming division. Okay, so the hay is a different division than the cows and the heifers. So we add those two gross margins up, and we have a divisional gross margin. Okay, which you see here on the livestock is 155, and on the hay is 26. Now we step back and we say, okay, are there overheads? Are there land and labor costs and equipment costs specific to the livestock division and specific to the farming division? And the test for that is if we stopped that division, would those costs go away? Okay. So we see here in the livestock division, there's a small amount of divisional overheads. But in the haymaking division, we've got a whole arsenal of machines that we have on hand in order to make hay. And if we didn't make hay, we wouldn't have the depreciation and the repairs of those machines. Okay. Maybe there's even labor units that are just tied up with the hay business. Okay, so those would go away. So then we're left with the divisional profit or loss when we take our divisional gross margin, subtract out those overheads. So we can see that the livestock are contributing about $135,000, and the hay business, wait a minute, it's moving backwards. It lost $9,000 in it. Okay. Now I'm not showing you guys these numbers to suggest that your numbers look like this. Okay, your numbers might be flipped if you're in the same businesses. It might be your hay business that's the one that's really driving the profitability, and maybe your livestock are losing. Okay, the point of this is you need to dive in and figure out what your numbers are, what on your ranch is working well, and what on your ranch is not working so well. So the business overheads, the cost of just keeping the doors open on the ranch, that's about $201,000. So that leaves us with a business profit or loss of $25,000. Now, you'll notice this is a bigger number than the loss we showed you on the first page. That's because we're talking about an economic loss here, not a cash loss. Okay? There's a little bit difference between when we talk about numbers economically and when we talk about things from a financial or a cash flow perspective. Okay? So a $25,000 economic loss. Okay. So what strategies could this business or really any business do to improve profit? Okay. There's a few things that always comes down to. Number one is let's figure out the enterprises that are consistently not working. For most ranches and farms that we look at, there's something going on inside that business that's a money loser, okay, that's not working. So stopping doing that, we're going to make more money. If we liquidate the assets that are tied up in that thing, we'll have capital to invest in the things that are working. Okay? So let's stop the things that are not working. Let's improve the marginal enterprises. So if something is pretty marginal and maybe it's something we like doing, then let's figure out a way to do it better. Okay? Harlan Hughes was a mentor of mine, and Harlan used to say, we need to get better before we get bigger. And I like that. So let's improve those marginal enterprises, and then let's hit the gas or expand the enterprises that are working. Okay. So for down and out farms, if we applied that concept, okay, so their overheads were about $200,000. Okay. The haymaking business was losing $9,000. The cows were making $105,000 in margin, and the heifers were making $50,000 in margin. Okay. So if we applied those principles to this business, okay, so the total economic loss we started with was negative $25,000. Well, what's the first thing to do? Okay, if we're not emotionally attached to anything in here, what's the first thing we can do? Well, most of you are going to say, well, let's stop the thing that's losing money. All right, let's do that. Again, this isn't a suggestion that your hay business is not working. I don't know. I haven't seen your numbers. But let's stop the things that are not working. Let's get better at the things that are marginal. Okay, let's see if we can find ways in those cows. Maybe there's a supplement we can feed for just a few days that would increase preg rates in those cows. Okay. Maybe there's a feed cost that we could take out that would reduce our direct costs, and that would improve the gross margin of those. Okay. Maybe there's some other strategies inside that, but there's probably something we can do to make that marginal enterprise even better. So finding $20,000 in that cow business, that's probably pretty low hanging fruit. Okay. And what about those heifers? Well, hey, they're working pretty well when we look at them on an animal unit basis. And when we looked at that enterprise, we already built in the cost of those heifer calves and the interest on the money for those heifers. Let's go buy the neighbor's heifers and let's do double that. Okay, if we stop making hay, all of a sudden we've got this grass that used to be tied up in making hay bales. Well, let's expand that heifer development enterprise. Okay. Now, let's leave the overheads the same. There's probably some room to cut those overheads, but without even working on that, if we did these things, stopped making the hay, made the cows a little bit better, and refocused that resource that was tied up into making hay into raising heifers, we took a $25,000 loss and we turned it into a $55,000 profit. Okay. $75,000 turn just from sitting down and doing the numbers and looking into it. Now, are we doing less or are we doing more? I think we're actually doing less. We took what was 3 enterprises and we turned it into 2. Now, it's probably not twice the work to check on twice the number of heifer calves out there. Okay. So sometimes you'll find that becoming more profitable actually involves less work, and that can be a hard thing for us to hear. Okay. So let's start wrapping up. This is a friend of mine, Heidi Stoltz. Heidi and her husband Thad ranch in northeastern Wyoming. Is actually on the phone with Heidi this morning. But here's her telling about diving into the numbers, learning how to look at them, and doing these numbers in projections a year in advance.
Oh, we came home with so much more than I would have ever expected. One of the huge things for us was the numbers, and being able to predict a year in advance what you were going to have at the end of the year, and then having the cash flow to know if you were following what you thought you were going to have, or if you were ahead or behind on your expenses. And that was huge for me, because every year there was a ton of anxiety over what December 31st would bring. And we knew we wanted to do the numbers, we needed to do the numbers, but we had no idea how to do the numbers. And so to just be able to plan and take that anxiety out of it was huge for us. Even though the numbers might not be quite the same, every year I go back and I do our actuals and I compare them to what we predicted, and they're pretty darn close every year. So when I do our projections, we have a lot of confidence in what those numbers are telling us. And last fall we did our projections and they weren't good. And we were both like, oh, this is terrible. But then we're like, no, this is great, because now we can fix it. Now we have what we need to fix this. It doesn't have to happen. It hasn't happened yet. We can fix it before it even starts. And we did. We repeated the school, came back with a lot, just as much as we did the first time, and this year's been good. We were able to change what didn't happen yet.
So Heidi and Thad do an awesome job up there ranching, but it really puts power in your hands in terms of just being able to make good strategic level decisions about which direction to take your business. So with that, let's wrap up. If you want more from us, there's a lot of ways you can stay in contact with us. We've got a really active Facebook page. We've got an active website. So on our website, you can sign up for Profit Tips, which is an email that comes out once every 2 weeks with just thought-provoking articles around profitability in agriculture. RFP First Steps is a series of 10 videos that are delivered to your emails that talk through some of the principles that we cover at the school. And you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook. There's a book and a DVD that give you a taste of what goes on at the school, and you can order those through our website. And obviously taking, or if you've already taken, repeating the Ranching for Profit School, and then after you take the school, getting involved in our Executive Link program. So check us out at ranchingforprofit.com if you want to learn more about any of those things. So just end with a quote from Viktor Frankl, which is, I think, appropriate for the times we're going through today. Viktor was a prisoner in the concentration camps of Germany, and made this statement: When we're no longer able to change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. So maybe it's time to start thinking about doing things differently. And some of those might be learning a different skill. So thanks for letting me join you today, and hopefully we've given you some useful things to think about.